So I'm going to pull out this this old gasket and these spark plug tube seals, so I'm going to be replacing all of this. My Vanos, in case anybody's wondering, I've done the Vanos myself, I want to say 2 years ago. I've used Rogers Bijan's parts. I did get a custom cryo treatment on my exhaust hub. I did get a re-drilled disc. I did all of the rattle kit, replaced all the seals, etc, etc. So I'm not going to be doing a Vanos job anytime soon, but I will try to do a video explaining how it works, because some of my S2000 friends who have had M3s are comparing it to VTEC, and it's a very different animal in terms of how it operates. So I think it would be good to kind of have an explanatory video on how Vanos works. But anyway, I'm kind of drifting off on a tangent here. Valve adjustment between M3 and the S2K is also very different. S2K has a screw that you adjust and then you tighten. M3 actually uses shims, so again, similar concept, but different in execution and implementation. Like I said earlier, I'm going to be using the 32 mil on the crank pulley to rotate the engine. You don't have to go too nuts about whether this, a particular cylinder is top dead center or not. All you want to make sure is that you have the cam lobes pointing upward and away from the valves that you're going to be looking at. You just want to make sure that you're off of the lift and the duration of the cam on the back of the lobe, facing the stem of the valve. That's basically where the clearance is. The other thing that I want to mention is that you want to do this on a cold engine. So let the engine sit overnight. Rotating the engine clockwise, if you're facing toward the windshield, rotating the engine clockwise that way is kind of the preferred way. If you're rotating it backwards just to kind of get it into a perfect position, it's not terrible. I mean, some people are against it just because you're putting a little bit of slack and a different tension on the tensioner here on the chain, but it's not going to skip any gears, so you don't really have to worry about it. But some people don't like doing that. I rotate the engines clockwise and then counterclockwise without any issues. Okay, next quick note that I want to cover is the tools that are going to be used in the shims. So there is a BMW kit that can be bought from BMW or from Turner or wherever for like 400 to 500 bucks, which comes with a lot of different sizes. You don't need to do that. You can buy individual ones, so if you have some time, you want to go through all of the measurements first to see what shims you need to put in to adjust your valves properly. It's 11 to 13 thousandths of an inch on the exhaust side and 7 to 9 thousandths on the intake. If you want to have a spreadsheet, run them down, and then to the extent that you need to adjust some of the valves, you can buy the individual shims from BMW. They're a couple of bucks each. If you don't want to do that, what I actually did is I bought two Wiseco shim kits. The kits are VSK4. On the old m3forum.net, before it went down, somebody actually did a test on hardness and durability of these shims compared to the BMW ones, and they basically were the same thing without really the BMW brand. So they come in a lot of the different sizes, but you do end up kind of using and reusing the same ones. The kit comes with 3 of each, so again I bought 2 of them and just combined them into one, so I have 6 of each. The other note that I want to mention on the shims is, to the extent that you pull out a shim, let's say you have to adjust the first intake valve on the first cylinder, and you pull out the shim from there, don't discard it, keep it, because you'll be able to reuse it for some other cylinder potentially. So you can reuse the ones that you pull out. You don't always have to just put in the new ones. So that's on the shims. Let's see, I did buy this magnetic pickup just because it makes the job a lot easier. I bought this, looks like a Saks one, I believe off of Turner. Maybe it's like 10 bucks. BMW one's like 30. You would need a caliper to measure these, because again the thickness on these is pretty small on the shims themselves. So you do want to be somewhat accurate to get you to within the tolerance required. And then on the feeler gauges, I know some folks get a little bit confused with this. So I got I'll show first what I got. So I got the 16 blade ABN offset feeler gauge. and they are angled, so it makes it easier to pull in and out. If you have the straight ones, you can, bend the ends for the ones that you need to measure. But where the folks get confused is the granularity of these, right? So sometimes you buy a kit that has, maybe like 5 blades, right? And maybe the granularity goes from, 10 thousandths to 15 to 20 to 25. So obviously if your measurements need to be, 11 to 13 on exhaust side and 7 to 9 on intake, you're just not going to be able to do that, right? So you need to make sure that you buy a kit that has enough of these guys to where you can get the measurement you need. So for this one, for example, this has every single thousandth between, 19,000 and 8 and 5. So again, if your granularity on these things is a big step between each one, you're not going to be able to get an accurate reading. Next quick note is, why are valve adjustments required? Different metals expand, contract, and wear at different rates, right? So the valve against the valve seat wears, right? So in that case, what makes sense is if the valve wears against the valve seat, it's going to be recessed and sitting further in the seat. So then the stem is going to be poking up higher, making your clearance less. So when you stick in your feeler gauge, you'll be like, oh, this is too tight, I need a smaller shim, right? The other side of it is when the clearance becomes a little bit too large. I think some folks are like, well, the tighter portion makes sense, but what about when it gets looser? There, it's possible that you're getting some carbon buildup on the valve and the seat. It's not sealing properly. Maybe you're getting a little bit of a burn on the valve. If you have burble tunes and all this other stuff that shoots a lot more gas in there that goes out of the exhaust valve, it's potentially burning the valve and creating deposits on it. The whole point of doing a valve adjustment is to get the proper clearance for enough air to be coming in and enough air to be going out, right? With that said, I'm usually starting with cylinder number 1, and then I go in order. I know there's a firing order of 1, 5, 2, 4, and 3, 6, so you can kind of do them in pairs, so to speak. When the valves are closed on, there will be 2 cylinders at a time. I usually just do them in order. I put things into a spreadsheet. I can link that in the description, so you can use it for yourself. The spreadsheet is very bare. It's like, what's the measurement, where do we need to be, and what's the adjustment required, and what's the shim that was pulled out, and so how much bigger or smaller the shim needs to be. Basic concept there is, let's say my finger is the valve stem, the top of my index finger is the valve stem, and then this my thumb on the top here is going to be the shim, and then my index finger on my left hand, which I'm moving right now, is going to be the rocker arm. So if you are going to be measuring that the clearance between the rocker arm and the shim is a little bit too large, you're going to need to put in a thicker shim, to take up that space, right? If the clearance is going to be too tight, you're going to need to put in a thinner shim. So that's basically all you're doing. Again, just adjusting the lash on the valve to make sure it's properly opening and closing with each stroke and rotation of the camshaft.